It's showtime, a-holes. Time to strap yourself in and brace yourself for Muscle Asylum TV and radio.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Muscle Asylum TV. We generally have a little bit of fun on this show and have a little bit of banter and a muck around, but this is one of our more serious episodes. So we are lucky to be joined by three people in the industry that are very high up and very well respected in the industry. We have Mike, who is Mike Nysten, who is the director of World Gym Australia. Troy Bremner, owner and director of International Protein. We've had you on the show before. And joining us from Fitness Australia, the CEO of Fitness Australia is Barry Elvish. So thank you guys for coming on. Thank you, Barry.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll start off, we've kind of already worked out a little bit of a structure on this show, so we'll start off with Mike. Obviously, everything that's happened in the industry and in the world around us has heavily impacted the fitness industry. How has what happened and with the restrictions and closures of gyms in and around Australia, how has that impacted the World Gym brand?
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark. Really appreciate it. I think there's the obvious impact. As of day one, all of our income for the whole group was cut to zero. So that obviously leaves a whole raft of questions about how do we do what we need to do, how do we keep paying what we need to pay, and gets us to think a little bit differently about business. I think the biggest impact for us, and I think to most employers, is to the employees. We've now got to strategise on how we keep employees gainfully occupied and engaged with our business. That's been one of the most challenging parts, although everyone has been very understanding across the group from what I've seen. So it's making us think differently about what we do. We've seen some great initiatives from some of our franchises in introducing some, I suppose, staff training at this time. So they're working through conflict resolution and, basically some more onboarding type skill sets that they've introduced in this time of trying to keep people engaged in the business, which I think is a credit to those people. We've also looked at the whole online platform. So, second to our employees is obviously our member base that we need to keep engaged. And for so many people, I think, in the world, the gym's not just a place of iron and fitness, it's a place of mind health. And that's where people go for their release, and it's their reset for their day. It either starts them in their day or it resets their mind at the end of their day when they've had a stressful day. The gym is their outlet. It's the new social gathering place, I think, as opposed to, some decades ago it was go to the pub after work, and now it's go to the gym after work. So it's a social gathering for people. It's where everyone connects. It's probably the new pickup place as well, more so than pubs and nightclubs as well. So
Mark definitely knows that.
Like, I know. We'll keep that quiet.
Happily married with child now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's all those spin-off effects that aren't really quantifiable until we get further down the track. So we're trying to keep people engaged and give them something to think about and give them some fitness plans to follow. So we're introducing in World Gym an online platform that's free to all of our members. We're trying to work out ways of expanding that out so as it's free to everybody, to get people, obviously utilising the World Gym brand for whatever they can today, so as they can keep doing what they want to do and do it from home. So we've got some live streaming, we've got home workouts, we've got call a PT. So there's a few different things that'll be coming on that site pretty soon. But that's what the industry as a whole is sort of working towards now. I think is just that active engagement with members and keeping them on board.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the most important thing that we get out of this is how to keep people engaged, employees and members alike.
How to keep our members sane more than anything. Troy, how has the closure of gyms impacted the supplement industry?
Well, obviously for the supplement industry, it's not quite to the level that gyms are, where their money stream is just cut because they're not allowed to open their doors. You're still allowed to sell online. You're still allowed to open your shop and sell, but obviously people's use of supplements has gone down. Buyer confidence as a wholesaler. Shops are now like, I don't know if I'm going to be closed down in the next 3 to 4 weeks or when gyms are going to open back up. So their purchase power or willingness to purchase has dropped probably 70%. So they just repurchase as they run out of stock. For us, obviously, we're a contract manufacturer. We make for, upwards of probably 25 brands in Australia at the moment. Pretty much most of those POs were cancelled, or purchase orders, were cancelled the day that they closed the gyms. People said, I'll just sit on the stock I've got and I'll see how I go. For us, 40% of our market is export, but unfortunately, most of our export countries have been closed down by COVID-19, the same as what we have, whether it be India or countries like that. So, look, we're struggling through, and much the same as Mike, we've got some strategies where we're training staff on extra things that we might have put off to one side for the quiet period. We've taken on some work to re-export to countries that aren't closed down. Admittedly, that work is almost a break-even cost of work, but it's going to keep my 48 employees in the manufacturing sector of the business employed. So for the next six months, I've taken that on. When this was first approached, you try to keep your chin up and you stick with it's probably going to be 3 months worst case scenario, but then, we're up in Queensland. We have Anastasia Palaszczuk coming out saying things like, this is going to go to Christmas, if not 18 months. When you hear that on the news, it's a little bit crushing, because we can sustain this for probably 3 to 5 months maximum. At the end of five months, we'd be looking at laying everybody off and saving whatever money we had left to pay our own bills. And I think that's probably a lot of people in the fitness industry. They've taken it on the chin, whether it be gym owners, shop owners, or anything else, and said, look, we're willing to help Australia. We're willing to really put in. We're willing to get through the hard times. When every day it's, hey, we might open this the 30th of May. No, that'll be the 30th of June. Hey, don't get excited. It might be August, might be Christmas. I think there really needs to be a look at the way the media is reporting things and the way the politicians are obviously trying to control the public, and if they do go out or don't go out. But how that crushes a business's spirit. I think Mike would agree. When they say 3 months, you get your head around it. Then when they say 18 months, you're sort of like, 18 months, geez, that's going to be hard to see the other side of.
Yeah, I don't know how any gyms. Barry, can you tell us a little bit about how Fitness Australia has been communicating with the government to find out exactly, basically what's happening and what the future holds for the fitness industry in the country?
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. Look, it's interesting, just to echo what Mike and Troy have just said. One of the problems we face is this confused messaging, which is coming out from all different sources. And even in terms of, we had a situation where we had to go back to the West Australian government and get them to clarify that it's okay to film virtual training one-on-one in a gym so that it can go online, like the sort of thing that Mike was talking about. We had a situation here in New South Wales where one of our gyms was, the police went in and issued a $9,000 fine for filming, one-on-one videos, etc., for the virtual. That's all been clarified now, that's all okay, that can be done. But that's a case in point of being very confused messages. And even when the various state governments make their decisions, how that's actually translating down to the people who have to enforce those decisions is also a little bit confusing. We've got a situation in every state except South Australia where you can't have groups in the parks, but in South Australia you can still have groups of 10 out in the outdoor area. So we're now trying to clarify, does that mean that they can run boot camps and those sort of things in those precincts? So it's very, very confusing. I do share the other guys' concerns about this messaging. So to come back to your question, Mark, we've reached out to every state health department to ascertain and work with them under what circumstances we can have a staged reopening of gyms. When the decision was made, it's very concerning from the industry's point of view and from Fitness Australia's point of view as industry association that there was no consultation whatsoever with us. It was just a blanket, okay, you guys are closing, suck it up, get on with it, and all the rest of it, and very little notice given. And we've all experienced what that impact on that is. I've had to get rid of 5 positions in the last month just so that we can stay afloat as well. But having said that, we have to move past this current situation and start trying to imagine what it's going to look like post-COVID-19. I've been speaking to a number of gym owners, big and small, to try and ascertain from them what their anticipated loss of membership may be in terms of when they do reopen, and their figures are coming in anywhere between 15 and 25%. That's going to mean a huge problem for services to be able to reopen and then get back to an economical operating paradigm, I guess. So the sooner we can get the health departments, the worst thing would be if all the health departments said there'll be no reopening until it's safe for a 24-hour facility to open. Now, if that was the decision that was made, that's going to crucify a lot of our smaller gyms, a lot of our franchise groups as well. So we're trying to engage with the health authorities to say, okay, you tell us under what circumstances can we reopen a facility, and what do we have to do to get that open? And those discussions have started, and hopefully we'll get some response sooner rather than later. It's our view that the Victoria and New South Wales will probably be the last ones to open because they've got the highest incidence of the virus. They've also got the highest population bases, the greatest density, and so on and so on. So we think it's more likely that WA and South Australia may open sooner than the other states. But who knows, because it depends on who you talk to on any given day.
What precautions do you think will be realistic when it comes to gyms reopening and not contributing further to the spread of the virus?
Okay, so, and this is Barry Elvish, this isn't Fitness Australia, but this would be my sort of response to that. A gym must have a swipe access to get in and out of the gym. The reason why that's important is that it gives health authorities, if there is an outbreak of the virus, an immediate contact list to be able to go back and see who's been involved with that. Clearly things like social distancing, which may require disabling of equipment to make sure that social distancing is in place. Disabling water bubblers, making sure there is people bring their own drinks, their own towels, increased hygiene and cleaning regimes, possibly temperature checks for a person that comes into the gym before they're actually allowed into the gym, so that you can check, whether they're running a fever and so on. There's a whole range of things, Mark, that may be possible. There's probably some things we haven't even thought about that the health authorities may have in the back of their minds, some of which will not be practical. But at this stage, we're trying to get them to engage with us so they can give us a list of what may be in their minds, and then we can go back to our members and say, okay, is this workable? Is this practical? If it's not, we have to go back and renegotiate it. But what the experience in Asia has shown us is that all of those measures I've just outlined are what has been agreed with the health authorities in Singapore, Hong Kong, etc., to get those facilities open.
Do you think that we would... For 24-hour clubs, I know all world gyms are 24-hour clubs now. Do you think another negotiation would be to have a club open only during staffed hours and to eliminate the whole 24-hour access option?
I think that would be. Yes, I do. When you say eliminate the 24-hour option, that would be only for a temporary until this is all settled down.
Yeah.
But I think it'd be very hard to expect any health authority. They're bureaucrats after all, so their risk appetite is exceptionally low, particularly you've got the media running around the place telling all kinds of stories. So yes, it may be that we have to go to a stage that only while facilities are staffed, manned, whatever you want to call it, that's actually going to be possible. Now, having said that, if a 24-hour facility has got a swipe card, you're still going to be able to access the contact list 24 hours a day, but that may be a bridge too far in the initial stages. And I don't want to have to wait until they say it's okay for unstaffed facilities to be able to open before we can all open.
Yeah, that makes sense. Has Fitness Australia collected any data on the transmission of COVID-19 within fitness environments? Like, for example, there have been documented cases of transmissions at dance parties, weddings, funerals, etc. Is there any scientific data to say that fitness facilities, and if such, which types of facilities pose a threat to the transmission?
There's been none that I have received or read of to date, Mark. The only one that I've been aware of is one which is in a Fitness First facility down in Melbourne about a month ago before they were closed. And as it turned out, that person presented at the gym with the virus already. They did not contract the virus at the gym. But I'm not aware of any situation where there is proven that gyms have been the cause of community contamination. And when you actually think about people who go to gyms, it's counterintuitive I mean, people by definition who go to gyms are interested in their personal well-being and fitness and health. So you would assume, well, I would anyway, that people that go to a gym have got perhaps a higher understanding of the need for hygiene and personal safety, etc., than maybe Joe Public has got.
I agree. Well, I had this discussion with Mike. As soon as it opened, it was more just let's get things off our chest and see what we're frustrated about. The thing that frustrated me the most was the fact that they enlisted all of these restrictions where we weren't allowed to have less than, I think it was 500 people in any indoor arena, but didn't really give it a chance. And we could have done so much more as gym owners and gym managers and so forth to actually do what we can to prevent the spread of the virus, but we literally did not get a chance. And like you said, there was no there was no communication with governing bodies like Fitness Australia at all.
And look, Mark, on that point, and I don't want to bag Fitness Australia, it's only been here 15 months, but I think the fact that the peak body of any industry not being consulted tells us a lot. It tells us how we as an association are perhaps viewed by decision makers, by government authorities, by people who, I guess, influence these sort of things. And also demonstrates, I think, to some degree, how the fitness exercise sector is viewed in the wider community. Now, I don't want to say something which is going to aggravate anybody here, but when I first started, I was told by the then CEO of Sport Australia in my first meeting, well, Barry, you do appreciate, don't you, that the fitness industry has got a very bad reputation. What do you mean? Well, you don't welcome females, you don't welcome young people. You're only there for people that want to pump iron and get their six packs. And I said to the CEO, I'm sorry, I don't know what gym you go to, but let me tell you, the gym I've just left in Victoria had more females than males. I'm an older person myself, but I was not the oldest person in that gym. There's many people older than me, and there were children and kids in other facilities associated with that gym. So the trouble we have here is the perception of gyms is very much old school. They don't understand, and it comes back to Mike's initial commentary here, gyms provide a service well beyond just a place to go and exercise. I mean, in a previous life, I was a history teacher, and I know I was an ancient history teacher, and gyms started way back, 2,500 years ago as a place for social interaction, education, a place for people to actually mingle and build up networks and so on and so on. That is what gyms do today. That is why I still go to a gym now. It's not just to exercise. Exercise is a means to an end. I personally have a history of mental health issues. I used to be a marathon runner, and I started that to actually use the exercise as part of addressing my mental well-being concerns. I go to a gym for the same reason. Over the Easter weekend, I read in the paper that places like Lifeline and Beyond Blue and domestic violence services have had an incredible spike in phone calls from people self-isolating and the troubles that this is causing. We have to get these facilities open again, not just for business, but for the mental and physical well-being of the Australian community. And we need to get government, health authorities and the wider community to understand that this is what gyms are. They are not something which operates in isolation. 4 million Australians have a gym membership. We need to get these services open again in ways that people feel safe and the rest of it. But this is a bigger issue than just shutting down a facility because it may or may not transmit the virus.
And look, this is what Mark and I were talking about earlier in the week. Our great concern is that the gym industry as a whole might be the forgotten stepson as such, because a lot of the decision makers are on the news saying things like, go out for some brisk exercise in the morning, have a 20-minute walk. For most of us, that's probably not going to be brisk exercise. Mark, that's totally different. For him, he's going to be puffed, but but yeah, I think the unfortunate thing is a lot of the people with the power to make decisions over your gyms, my future, everybody else's future, and also their hobby or the activity that we enjoy so much, don't understand why we do it, or even to the level that we do it, or the amount of people I've heard on news talk about, why can't you do yoga in the morning? I'm like, I don't really want to do yoga in the morning or replace my weight session or anything else. But the fact that they think you can just do some beginner's level yoga to replace what would actually be a hard weight session shows the level that they're already understanding the exercise that a lot of us actually do. But that's the real concern. As I watched the news last Sunday, I think it was, and they had some celebrity chefs on there saying restaurants must open, you're destroying our industry, you can't take a $60 steak on a takeaway platter and eat it an hour later once you've driven back home. It doesn't work for us. And the media was quite behind the fact that, yes, restaurants must open, this must open, that must open, but in none of the conversations that I hear that gyms must reopen. So I was already getting concerned, as I said when I spoke to Mark, that gyms were somewhat getting forgotten in the total discussion, without the fact that the two gentlemen that we've got here have probably leveraged their future livelihood and, you know, part of their heart in growing their business, as the Australian sort of ethos is, you know, become an entrepreneur, grow a business, employ some people, create a family, look after those people, and then they just rip it out from under you and say, hey, maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, maybe 18 months. We don't know when we can let you reopen. You go, well, what did I put the last 30 years of work into then?
Yeah,
You know, I could have just worked for somebody else and now, you know, be waiting for the JobKeeper's allowance and not have had this stress on my family, on my livelihood, haven't got my house on the line to start this business. Like, what have we all done if our government's not supporting the entrepreneur that starts their own business?
Yeah, that's the hardest part. Hey, Barry, I think what's frustrated me personally more than anything is just the inconsistencies of restrictions. And we used the example before of hairdressers where they're physically touching a person's head. So physical contact is there, and they initially were, I think it was a 30-minute time limit, which would have only increased the turnover of people walking in and out of a hair salon, and then they changed their mind the next day to 2 hours. What was your personal feeling when the initial announcement was made? Were you more so obviously upset, but were you frustrated with the inconsistencies in what restrictions were applied?
Yeah, look, I was, mate, but let me just give you an anecdote here. The gym I go to, which I won't, it's one of the franchise groups, I won't embarrass which one it was, but the gym I go to, I'd been at them for 3 weeks saying, you guys need to visually increase your cleaning, you need to be demonstrating, you need to put some signage up, etc. And it was only on the day before they were closed that I went to them and I actually took some signs that I downloaded off our website to say, listen, you know, I've told you guys, they know who I am. And I said, look, you guys need to, you're not doing enough. If you are symptomatic of what's happening in the bigger sector, you're going to get shut. And lo and behold, they put the signs up that day. The next day, the decision was made to shut. Now, that is just in a micro version of what I'm thinking was probably happening in many, many services around the place. And to come back to Troy's comments, and I agree with them, and I think as much as Fitness Australia in the past hasn't done enough to position the industry where it should be positioned, so have many of the gyms themselves. And one of the things that really strikes me as being a little bit odd in this whole business is when I talk to people in the business, they say, well, you know, Barry, 20% of Australians have got a gym membership, and I really want to increase my take of that 20%. And that's interesting, but the question I have, and you guys would know the business a lot more than I do because it's not my background, is why aren't we growing the 20%? Why are we stuck on this 20% business? It seems to be like that's the cap. Well, I actually don't believe that. And I was looking at World Gym's website before I came online this morning to get a bit of an idea and understanding where you guys have come from. And that history timeline going from the 1960s. I mean, it wasn't 20% back in the 60s. And it probably wasn't 20% in the 70s or 80s. So why are we so locked on this 20%? So what I'm saying to you, Mike, is we need to grow this 20%, but also we need to, and it was Machiavellian and Churchill paraphrased that never let a good crisis pass you by. This COVID thing for an organisation like Fitness Australia that really was toothless and did bugger all in the past, in my view, as an industry association, is an opportunity that any other industry association would. It's unfortunate what's caused it, but this is an opportunity for us as an industry association to work with you guys as the members to actually reposition what exercise and fitness means in the bigger community and in the government decision makers and so on. So I don't go to Sport Australia and get confronted by an out-of-date perception. I don't have the Federal Minister for Sport eyeballing me at an address a month ago saying, Barry, you know, exercise has got gyms have got a bad reputation again. You know, this is the Federal Minister. He was actually saying that because he actually then said, I'm really glad you're here because I now get to understand the importance. It was a mental health exercise. I now understand the importance of linking exercise with mental health. Now, hello, you know that, I know that, but people in higher echelons don't seem to understand that. So we need to use this as an opportunity when we do reopen to actually get exercise and fitness valued much more importantly for what it does beyond what just takes place in a bricks and mortar building or out in a boot camp in the park. So yes, I was devastated, but I've got to say I wasn't surprised we weren't consulted because our profile as an industry association was subpar, to put it mildly.
Has the government in any way explained to Fitness Australia the logic behind its decision to keep things like hairdressers and bottle shops open but close gyms? Have they explained it at all in any way at all?
I believe they're taking most of their advice from WHO and what's happening in other countries. I suppose, unfortunately, a lot of the advice from WHO has been somewhat ineffective or incorrect when it comes to controlling the virus to this point. But I think because we're in uncharted waters with something like this happening in Australia, they're still taking advice on what's happening at the world level and what the advice comes from who. So when you look at every country, whether it be India, Singapore or anything, if the advice comes down, you must close gyms because people sweat there and it sits on surfaces for 2 hours up to 24 hours, they think, depends whether it's stainless steel, porous, not porous. The government says, well, we have to take that advice until we get strong evidence that that advice is wrong, but that evidence isn't going to come in the next 2 to 5 weeks or 10 weeks. This will be something they look back on in 7 years' time and say, hey, now we know more about this actual process. It's also worrying that you have ministers sitting there saying, we're keeping restrictions on until until a vaccine is found for this virus. You go, well, some vaccines are found for some viruses and some vaccines have never been found for some viruses. So if that's your yardstick of when you're going to move to being back to more normal life, that yardstick could be 25 years away, and we could still not have a vaccine to it.
I think one of the things that you've raised, Barry, which I think is probably key to all this, is that we don't really have a voice. Nationally, we don't have a voice. We do. There are, and World Gym know better than anybody what it's like to be stereotyped. People consider us to be a bodybuilder's gym. My argument back to that is, what's a bodybuilder? Everybody's a bodybuilder now. You're building a body to run marathons. My wife's building a post, motherhood body. So everyone's building the body that they're trying to build. That's the message that we need to try and get out there. All of our gyms, like you said, Barry, over 50% female membership. That's a great thing for the industry. That's where the growth has come from. I think in the last probably 10 years in gym members has been female, because they're feeling more comfortable to come into a gym environment. They're more empowered, strong is the new sexy, all that sort of stuff. But I think on the voice, it's interesting. I was talking to the owner of World Gym Taiwan. They were instructed in January to close. And Mike, if you wouldn't know Mike, but he's a very stubborn person and he's very, 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 very system-driven and structured, and he's an incredible operator. They have, I think, in excess of 80 clubs in Taiwan now, World Gym Taiwan, and he put a program together similar to what we were doing here, with monitoring people into the gym, cleaning regimes, visual cleaning, providing comfort that everybody that what they were doing was actually helping to avoid the spread of this virus. And he put his plan and lobbied Parliament and got the decision reversed. He is still trading today. All of his facilities are open today. They're all running through this regime of, testing, and they're doing the temperature checks like you were saying. But Taiwan's been doing that for years. Yeah, I think ever since SARS or whatever was before that one. You walk through the airport and they're checking your temperature. So it's sort of an Asian thing, I think, where they've been through not as bad, but something similar, and they've learnt from that, and they've learnt to live through it, not avoid it, so to speak. So I think that just says to me that that's one gym owner operator. Granted, he's the biggest one in Taiwan, but he's got a voice, and he's They see the fitness industry over there, and they see what World Gym Taiwan's doing as a valuable asset to their country. Exactly what you said. We're not seen like that here.
No, but that's true. But we are actually, I mean, there is some light into the tunnel, I guess, and I don't want to be coming across as all, despairing the rest of it. But the Victorian government, for example, had planned an Active April campaign to run in the state to get people active. And it was all geared for outdoors until they shut everybody down. So they then came to Fitness Australia and said, okay, can we use some of your virtual online programs to include in our Active April campaign? So they came to us and it was good. In Queensland, there's a quasi-government unit called Health and Wellness or Health and Wellbeing or something. I can't remember what it's actually called. And we've been working with them to make available our on virtual online programs, which we launched about 10 days ago. And just hearing what you said before, Mike, I'd be really pleased if you guys could come on board with that as well and make your program successful as well. So it's called Keep Moving Australia, and there's a whole lot of free stuff, and there's a whole lot of paywall stuff as well, so it's open to the public. There is one of our arguments that we are taking to government is, and it comes back to Troy, your comment about hairdressers, etc., that we believe that exercise facilities, fitness facilities, gyms, call it what you like, should be classified as an essential service because of the linkage with the mental, physical well-being. And it's been actually quite pleasing, and I think this is partly a result of what we've been doing over the last 3 or 4 weeks, that when the Prime Minister announced 2 or 3 weeks ago, I can't remember which it was on a Sunday night, he actually referred to spin classes, boot camps, using this terminology, and actually spelled out BARE, B-A-R-R-E, etc., in the press conference. And I actually take that as actually, okay, exercise is now at least starting to get on the agenda. And you've had the Prime Minister, the Health Minister, the Chief Medical Officer all saying, okay, there are only 4 reasons to go outside: shopping, medical appointment, work, or exercise. So exercise is on the mind. Our task as an industry association and all of our members is to help the government, and I use the word help, euphemistic way to some degree, understand exercise and fitness and gyms, they're all related. And when you've got 4 million Australians, which is what 20% of the population or thereabouts, who actually have a gym membership, okay, it might drop when we reopen, but nevertheless we'll get it back that hopefully more. This should never happen again, because exercise and fitness, places where people do go and exercise, should be viewed as an essential service. And if we had that done 10 years ago, 5 years ago, we wouldn't have this discussion now. It'd be a different discussion. But we are where we are, and I just think we need to use this opportunity as an industry and as an industry association to just try and reposition what this actually means for decision makers. So we've got a couple of strategies we're going to push through while we're all in close down to hopefully, reinforce the standards that our members represent, both in terms of facilities and individuals. And we will be using that to go back to the government and say, listen, we're not a regulatory body, but we have a similar type role, and you can have confidence in that a member of Fitness Australia meets certain standards, upholds certain standards, codes of practice and so on, and people that are individuals who work in those gyms as members of Fitness Australia also adhere to those standards. So therefore there is some degree of comfort, and that's going to be really important when we reopen, as we try and encourage new people to come into a gym to make up at least the shortfall of those who don't come back, but hopefully grow that 20% into a 25, whatever percentage down the track. So I actually do see some opportunity here once we get through this bloody disastrous situation we're in at the moment.
A date has been thrown up in the air, and I think it revolves mostly around the NRL's intention to relaunch. I think it was May 28th. Has the fitness industry at all used that as leverage, I guess, to say, well, if they're ready to relaunch and they're ready to kick off again, there's really no reason why we shouldn't at least have a rollout of gyms reopening with certain restrictions. Have you guys used that date at all? No?
We haven't, Mark, and there's two reasons for that. First of all, I think that's a bit of kite flying by the NRL, to be honest, at the moment. You've already had pushback from the Prime Minister and the CMO down, and the argument that the NRL was used, I mean, they might try and say it's a social activity, it's a social good, but the bottom line is it's a commercial reason they're trying to push to be reopened. Yeah. And I think we have to be very careful that we as an association aren't perceived by the media or governments as pushing for reopening purely for commercial benefit. It's got to be, yes, absolutely there's a commercial benefit, and we've just finished some research Thursday before Easter, which has now been collated by some professionals. We asked our members, tell us what the impact of the closures has been on your business in terms of income, redundancies and so on. We had over 1,500 responses to that. We're putting that together. We'll go back to the government and say, this is the impact of what you have done. So this is the commercial cost of what you've done. But by the way, guys, you need to think about reopening because of the other benefits of exercise. So we haven't got a date in mind. Having said that, the Premier of Western Australia did say there'll be some relaxations from the 1st of May over in WA. So we are engaging up there with the Health Department to try and work out under what circumstances, if in those first relaxations, some gyms or some exercise programs can reopen.
And is it more a rollout? I think the 1st of May was the same announcement made by Gladys, I can never pronounce her surname, the Premier of New South Wales. Is it more trying to push the fitness industry and gyms up the list of non-essential businesses to be reopened first?
Well, yeah, I don't see it as a competition, but yes, it is trying to get fitness, I guess, considered in that first tranche rather than a Johnny-come-lately, which is how we got closed.
Yeah.
So will we have any luck? Time will tell, but that's our argument.
Well, I think we're all on the same page when it comes to that. Nobody's asking for preferential treatment. Nobody's asking for anything to be put in front of what common sense versus danger is. But I think everybody's just asking to be considered on the same level as every other industry. And, you know, you bring up the NRL as a perfect example where you see some very highly paid footballers complaining about a pay cut, even though their wage per week could still be more than a lot of people's wages per month. Pushing to come back early, saying, "Oh, this is essential." I'd say the 1 million Australians that have been put out of work, their jobs to them are very essential. Yeah. Mike's business opening and him servicing his customers and fulfilling probably what was very rewarding work until they closed him down is essential. Same as your work's essential. Every PT's work's essential. Restaurant owners, staff are essential. Everybody's essential. So I think all of us are just pushing to be considered all at the same level, not that why is NRL or a restaurant because of celebrities behind opening a restaurant more essential than what a fitness club is. Nobody's more essential than anybody. Everybody needs their job. Everybody also needs a purpose in life. So a lot of mental stability for most of us comes from the momentum of our business. For me, as you'd know, Mark, a lot of people might not know watching this, I have about 4 businesses going on at once, all somewhat interlinked with the next business. So when one goes bad, it tends to have a flow-on effect to my rest. Probably a bad way to set up the structure, but such is life. You go, but for me, I have a lot of pressure behind me. Quite a few containers on the water going to different countries, waiting for payments, ordering my next lot of stock when things come in. What keeps me mentally stable is not focusing on that, focusing on what I'm doing next. Obviously, when there's a up to 70% slowdown of all the business around me, I'm focusing on what's behind me. It's quite stressful. It's quite stressful for my family. You know, it's quite stressful for everybody around me probably. And I imagine that's the same for you, Mark, the same for you, Mike, the same for Fitness Australia. You're always focusing on that little bit of growth. What's the next goal? What do I have to do to keep the momentum going? When something like this happens, the momentum stops for everybody. And that's not just our business. That's the guy wants to, grow his restaurant, grow his customer base, grow his business. Anybody in any form of business, it's the momentum that keeps them mentally stable. When that momentum stops, the stress mounts.
Yeah.
I think that's a really valid point. I think, Barry, one thing you highlighted there about the NRL and the commercial need for them to get moving again, I think for us, it's a very different scenario. That the commercials of us reopening in part and with a whole heap of restrictions are probably not great.
Yeah.
It's going to cost us money to implement, the proper cleaning regimes. We're going to have to limit the amount of people that are allowed to come in. What's that going to do to our member base? Are people going to cancel because they can't come whenever they want? So for us, the commercial impact to opening, if not fully open, is probably greater than the commercial impact of us not being open. So for us, exactly as Troy was saying, it's about providing the service and being that wheel that just needs to keep on turning to keep everybody engaged. It's the gears need to turn from one end to the other. You can't stop the gear in the middle. So it's I think it's more than commercial.
Their life's got some purpose.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think like an example of that is like I'm getting inundated with members messaging me on a daily basis asking when the gym's going to reopen, have I heard any news, because they're absolutely losing it, not being able to train. I don't think Hoyt's down the road is getting inundated with calls saying, I really want to come and watch a movie. Like you said, Mike, it's completely different. And the reason why I brought up the NRL is in my opinion, look, I'm a massive NRL fan, and there's more than anything, I'd love to see it come back. But I would think it would be a huge contradiction if they allowed the NRL to kick off and not did the same with any other business. And like you said, Troy, we're all essential at the end of the day. So,
look, and the worrying thing in this whole thing is the contradictions you see. And I can't say I fully understand all the rules. Like undoubtedly, you've all been to the supermarket and you pick your own groceries. You put them on the belt. The person scans them through, and then stacks them at the other end and says, "You must stack them into your own bag because I have a chance of catching COVID-19 by stacking them into the bag for you." You go, I understand what you're saying, mate, but you just touched everything that I just touched for the last half an hour shopping.
Makes no sense.
Does this make sense to anyone?
Makes no sense.
There's things in this where you're just like, it makes no sense.
There's a secret plan there, Troy. Let them all go down the Audi model. That's what that is.
We won't talk about conspiracy theories or anything like that. But to finish it off, I've got one more question for Mike, one more question for Barry. With Mike, I just wanted you to share your opinion on what we're doing in the greater good, because I spoke to you a couple of days ago and I think I was having a bit of a moment saying that I feel like it's a huge overreaction. And still part of me still does, and I do understand that what we're doing as a nation is obviously controlling the spread of this virus, and it's a positive at the end of the day, but part of me feels like it's an overreaction. You kind of put it in perspective for me. Do you want to just kind of explain to me what you said and why you think this is the greater good and it's a good thing that we've closed for the meantime?
Like I'm obviously no expert on it. There's a lot smarter people than me making all these decisions. But when you look at, like I'm a bit of a data nut. So when you look at numbers, the numbers tell the story. And you exclude some of the countries that obviously aren't giving us their numbers, like China, for example. That's a classic I suppose, resistance to being part of the journey here because they're just doing their own thing. But, you look at what's happened in Australia, and I think, I actually take my hat off to the government in Australia now. I think they've probably got, it's funny how politicians, they want to be a politician, and I bet none of them ever sign up for what they're going through at the moment, because they are the butt of all complaints. Nothing they're doing is right in anybody's mind. It's all wrong, and they could have all been done better. And I take my hat off to them. I reckon that the way it's been handled in Australia has been amazing, to be honest. I think, if anything, it maybe should have been a little bit sooner. But I think, when you look at the numbers and what they're doing and this flattening of the curve, etc., I think it's the way to save lives, and it may be a longer process and a road to getting us back on deck. But I think if you look at countries that, shunned, the advice of other countries, and you look at America, like 2,500 people died in America last night. It's ridiculous. It is way out of control. And they're still, because I think that the way this came up with you and me, Mark, was I was talking to our American counterparts. Yeah. And they're just, it's like they're living in a different world and they're not watching the news globally. It's like, up until 3 weeks ago, they were still opening after Easter. Well, that's now. And they're not open. And now they're saying, maybe May. They're just living in this false world. And I think that we've been told from the start that, whatever measures we take have to be sustainable for about 6 months. And I think that was a really good way of doing it, because straight away they're planting the seed in your head that this is a long-term problem. Maybe it won't last that long, but be prepared in case it does, right? So hence everybody's got a big stockpile of toilet paper. But, I think in essence, you have to look at the data and you have to look at the numbers. And I think all the good Western countries that have good medical and good reporting facilities, etc., like Australia, the numbers are pretty true. I think my fear is what we've been talking about earlier is how do you undo the shutdown? How do you re-implement normal life, like you were saying, Troy? Like how do you get back to what's normality when there's going to be sleepers around, and do you wait for a vaccine, and how long is that? But yeah, mate, honestly, I think it was handled pretty well in Australia. I think we had the advantage of learning from other countries. They didn't get everything right. There's, the JobKeeper, and there's other things that we could certainly sit here and talk about and criticise all day long. But in essence, I think the death rate and the contraction rate in Australia is definitely dropping. You would think, looking at the numbers, that they're definitely getting it under control. And I think that's the country that I want to be in for sure. I want to be a part of that process rather than the US one or other countries,
I agree, yeah. Barry?
I 100% agree with Mike too, and I think to stick up for politicians here, and it's easy to pick on them, hindsight's always 20/20. Any decision made where you're going to put potentially 1 to 6 million people out of work, change a way of life in a whole country, can't be made in 1 second or in one day when they're saying things should move quicker, slower. Can you imagine us four sitting around deciding over 24 million people's fate and how they're going to go about their daily life? Any decision made at the moment is so hard because the ramifications are so huge. Either you're going to have a lot of people die, it's going to get out of control and last for longer than it should. It's going to be harder and everybody's going to be unhappy, but it's going to happen maybe shorter. So the decisions that politicians are making at the moment would be so heart-wrenching and hard to make, and also because they're in a popularity race. So any decision made at the moment, they know is probably not going to get them voted out at the next election, even if it's the right one.
Yeah. Let's try and finish off with a little bit of positivity. Barry, is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Like I just really want to emphasise to everyone that we do have a voice in Fitness Australia, and you guys are doing everything you possibly can to help the entire industry in our country. What's your perception of the light at the end of the tunnel? What do you see happening in the very near future? And I know you obviously can't, you're not Nostradamus, and you can't give anyone any false hope, but what do you think the best circumstances are for everyone moving forward?
Okay, Mark. So there is a light into the tunnel, and let's just hope it's not that bloody proverbial train coming full bore at us. But I very much think that, and it comes back to a couple of comments that Mike was making. There's an opportunity here for the sector and the association to be good corporate citizens here, and actually help rebuild the community as it comes out of COVID, because this has never happened before in the world. This is something completely unique, and we're all in uncharted territory and all those sort of cliches, etc. But there is an opportunity, I think, for the sector and the association to work together, to work with government, to work with allied health, etc., to actually rebuild the community. And it's a fantastic opportunity for us to demonstrate to the wider community, that other 80%, the value of this sector. And I actually would encourage all of the listeners and viewers to this podcast to get involved, get engaged with Fitness Australia, tell us what we can do better, tell us what we're doing well, because this is just, it really is a fantastic opportunity. And yes, it's pain at the moment, but I actually think we're going to come out of this better and stronger, in a totally different environment, a totally different world of exercise.
I agree. And I mentioned this the other day. I think people that have never exercised a day in their life are seeing the importance of exercise now, because they see how many people are mentally affected by not being able to go to the gym, and they're kind of like sheep in a way, but they're like, oh, well, I'm going to go outside and start doing some banded squats and walk around and do some laps and whatever they can do. Look, guys, I appreciate all of your time. I know you're all very busy men. Troy, you're trying to keep a business afloat. Mike, you're trying to do what you can to keep all your franchisees sane. And Barry, you're obviously doing what you can to converse with the government and save us all. you're Jesus at the moment. But I just want to say thank you all for all your time. Anyone listening to this podcast, please make sure you subscribe and give us a little bit of like, comment below. But again, thank you very much, Barry, for coming on, and Mike, Troy, appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thanks
Mark.
for having us.